Look, sometimes you get possessed by a pharaoh and sometimes you don't. So today we're going to be making the Millennium Puzzle from Yu-Gi-Oh! At a glance, this is a pretty simple build, but if you follow along, we'll be going through some options for foam details and finishing along the way. So the body of this is a 4-sided pyramid, which means that we'll need to make 4 equilateral triangles, and also a square that'll go on top, and the edge of that square has to be equal to the edge of the triangles as well. We'll also need to make a hoop for the top of the pyramid, and that will connect to a chain, so you can wear it around your neck if you'd like to. And then I think for the front face, we'll sculpt that Eye of Horus, which, if you play Overwatch, that's also tattooed on my girl Farah. What you might find from a lot of the reference images are that the sides look very plain, but I found this cool template on DeviantArt that shows very intricate line work, and I think that really makes it look like the puzzle that it is. So, let's get started making our base. Now, if I had to go to a costume party in like the next 15 minutes, I think I would just quickly tape these faces together, draw all the details on with the Sharpie, and then we'd be done with it. But stick with me. So to explore some options of getting those etching details into the foam, you've got a few things you can do. One is, if you've got a soldering iron, you could heat it up and scorch those channels right into the foam. Another option is taking your utility knife and scoring the lines, not cutting all the way through, and then coming back and going over the whole surface with a heat gun to separate those edges. So with the soldering, even though I was using a metal ruler as a guide, it's still kind of hard to keep those channels looking nice, but it certainly gets deep enough to give you the detail. Now with scoring the lines and then using a heat gun to separate the seams, you get pretty decent detail, but it is really hard not to overcut in some of those areas. So soldering the foam is probably your fastest option. The scoring and heating of the foam, I might save that for a different application. But what I think I'm going to do for this is actually cut out all of these little pieces out of a clean sheet of foam and then layer them all on top of another thin triangle. And I think that'll give us the cleanest look with the most defined separation. Okay, basic strategy here. We've got 2 identical triangles cut out of 2mm foam. I've transferred the details from our template onto one of these, and I'm going to cut out all of these individual pieces to then lay on top of this triangle. But the way that I'll cut this out is by slicing the foam on either side of the Sharpie line, and that'll give me a nice, clean, even break between all of the pieces when we lay them back down. So now for adhering all of these little bits onto the underbase, we have to think about adhesives. And now normally when joining foam to foam, I would go with barge contact cement. That's a really nice solid hold, but the thing about barge is that once you start laying that down there, like that's it, that's not going anywhere. Like there's no repositioning that. And I certainly don't trust myself to float that in exactly where it needs to be on the first shot. So I wanted something that maybe you get a little bit of wiggle room. So then I thought about Super 77. And I thought, okay, maybe this will work. So I did a test, you know, just like spraying the underside with this and just laying a few scrap pieces onto this little piece. And it certainly adheres foam to foam very nicely, but it leaves a really gritty layer for any parts that are going to be exposed. So that's kind of not that nice. Also, it's going to get all over your fingers. So then when you start touching all these pieces, you leave little smudges, and then that leaves more surface cleanup at the end. So then I thought about using Mod Podge. Now, I think the advantage here is that you could lay this down on the underside, you'll get some floating time to position all these pieces exactly where you want them, and it also dries completely clear, so that's kind of nice for when we go to finish later. see in the cracks here that the first little bit of Mod Podge that I laid down is already dry and clear. So this sets up pretty fast, but I think it gives you just enough time to work it. Now that our cardboard core is done, we can stick these faces right on the outside. Okay, we're now left with two weird shapes to make. One is the eye that's going to go on the front of the pyramid, and the second is that weird little hoopus shape that goes on top, and you'll be able to link your chain through that. Now, I was thinking about a couple ways to do this. You could just buy an eye bolt, and that would probably be your easiest bet. Thread that right through the top, lock it from the bottom with a nut, and paint the entire thing gold, and that would probably look pretty nice. But when we look at the reference images for this piece, it's actually more of a half circle. So to make sure I get the shape that I want, and specifically to have the contact area get a little bit wider than it is at the top, I'm going to sculpt this. So to make sure this top connection is nice and strong, I've got the same foam and cardboard layer as before, and we're also going to send two nails up through the back of this, and that'll give something for our clay to grab onto. Something like that. Now that these two details have hardened up, I think it's a good time to use some barge contact cement to seal the top on, and then we can take it outside to plastidip. So while the plastidip is drying, I also want to show you the chain that I got. This is just a plastic white chain, and I snipped a link right at the end here so that I can just bend it and reattach it here. And I'll give this a couple coats of silver in the meantime. So when we're considering surface finishing options for this bare foam, you could just paint gold right on top of it. This kind of foam won't disintegrate when you spray it, and it will certainly look gold, but it's not going to be bright and shiny like real gold would be. So on this other square sample, I painted this with a few layers of plastidip first and then sprayed on gold, and that really gives it that nice shine. And you can see from both of these pieces actually that they've started to bow upward after I sprayed them, and that comes from putting a layer of moisture down on it when you spray, and then it starts to dry and it pulls the whole piece upward. So that's why it's really important to have this stuck to a cardboard backing to keep your pyramid nice and rigid. Okay, this is looking like a gold casted piece. I think for some final detailing, we're going to take some watered down black paint and get into these channels, and we will be done. So that is our finished Millennium Puzzle. And if you get a little carried away doing those black detail lines, if you're like me, you can always spray some gold in a cup and just go right back over it to clean it up. If you have any suggestions of what we should make next time, send an email to DIYPropShop@break.com or just leave us a comment below. And as always, we'd love to see your builds, so keep sending them in. Until then, I'm Vinny. I'll see you back here next time.